asked you the question, what kind of ninja would you want to be if you were teleported into the Naruto world? What would your answer be? Some of you would say you'd want to be a genjutsu specialist so you could control people from the shadows. Maybe some of you are inspired by Rock Lee and Might Guy, or just participate in martial arts here in the real world, so you'd be a taijutsu specialist. And I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of you would probably say ninjutsu specialist. Because if we're being real, the coolest thing you can do in the Naruto universe is ninjutsu. But I'm willing to bet that very few of you, if maybe possibly none of you, would say if you were teleported into the ninja world, you'd want to be a sensor type ninja. And honestly, who could fault you? Choosing sensor type ninja in the Naruto world's like choosing support on 5v5 hero shooters. It's a submissive choice. However, much like I have an immense amount of love for everybody who chooses support, those of you who would choose to be sensor type ninjas are truly the best amongst us. But what is a sensor type ninja? Who are these support class ninjas who live in the shadows of giants like Naruto and Sasuke? Are their roles important, and what makes them different from a regular ninja? Well, I honestly believe if more people knew the answers to these kinds of questions, then more people would choose to be a sensory type ninja in the Naruto world. Because sensor type ninjas are not only incredibly important in the Naruto universe, but also some of the most overpowered ninjas in the Naruto universe. And thus today, to paint the best possible picture of these sensory type ninjas, today we're gonna be talking sensor type ninjas explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We are halfway through Naruto versus Neji, and Neji's backstory is hidden. So today we're gonna start this video off like we tend to start these kinds of videos off, by answering the easy questions. So what is a sensor type ninja? Well, in the easiest sense, a sensor type ninja is a ninja who's capable of detecting others, usually other ninja, through the usage of their chakra. But Nick, you're saying seemingly every single ninja in Naruto is able to sense other people's chakra signatures. And you're right, to some extent they are. See, even the most fledgling of ninjas, Genin if you shall, can feel the presence of chakra when it's especially dense or being released in a high volume. This is why whenever Naruto unleashes Kurama's chakra in the early parts of Naruto, everybody can sense just how much chakra he's putting out. Now, in the early days of Naruto, these high output unleashed moments of chakra pouring out of individuals is also usually tied to killing intent, and that killing intent is also usually identifiable by even the weakest of ninjas. However, where sensor type ninjas separate themselves is that they are the only ninjas who are able to sense other people's chakra at their own discretion, meaning they don't have to wait for somebody to unleash a mass amount of chakra and killing intent or use a crazy powerful jutsu to identify where a person is and what they're about. And honestly, that's kind of understating what a sensor type ninja is able to accomplish. See, sensor type ninjas can not only identify where certain individuals are, but also can identify their strength level and the differences in their chakra signatures that separate them from the people they're around. That is to say, a skilled sensor type ninja is able to determine which individual is which by using their sensory techniques. And skilled sensor type ninjas are able to do this in a radius of dozens of kilometers around them. That is to say that they're able to feel out with their chakra to identify what and who is around them, ascertain their strength level, and hone in on individual chakra signatures. And these sensor type ninjas are not only able to look at the group as a whole, but also pan in on one individual to see exactly what they're doing, being able to follow their movements to see if they're in combat, watching the fluctuation in their chakra to see if they're lying in the conversation they're currently holding, or seeing if there's disruptions in their chakra flow that could indicate that they're possibly under the effects of genjutsu. But surely only the strongest sensor types out there should be able to do things like this, right? Well, kind of. See, sensory abilities kind of come in one of two packagings. The first packaging, the baseline packaging we'll call it, come from those who use the sensing technique to tap into their sensory abilities. Now, the sensing technique is kind of a catch-all term that can be used for anybody who's able to tap into the sensory chakra. See, while there are individual sensing techniques, like Karin's Mind Eye of the Kagura, the Hyuga's Byakugan, Gaara's Concealed Sand Picture Cat, and a couple of others, by far and away, the most common way that sensory type ninjas sense other ninjas is the sensing technique, which is kind of akin in terms of catch-allness to the Sharingan Genjutsu. But how does this sensing technique work? Well, it's not automatic, and it can only be used by sensor types. See, most sensor types, in order to reach out into the abyss and try and identify a chakra signature, require an insane amount of concentration. But more than that, they also have to change their chakra to that of sensory mode. See, in order to convert chakra into anything, that being genjutsu, ninjutsu, or sensory techniques, that chakra needs to be kneaded into the specific thing that you want it to be, and therefore fundamentally undergoing either the creation of a great fireball technique or the sensing technique is no different. However, knowledge of how to do it is why only certain individuals can either make great fireballs or use the sensing technique. However, this can make it particularly hard to use sensing techniques while you're already engaged in combat, because in order to use your sensing technique, you have to take chakra that would usually be reserved for things like taijutsu, ninjutsu, or genjutsu and put it into sensory. And while one could assume that by converting your chakra into that of the sensory type, you would gain a greater understanding of your surroundings and could possibly see attack coming from your blind spot, time and time again in Naruto, it's been proven, regardless of how good of a sensor you are, in order to dodge an attack, you probably need to see it coming. And most sensors, while using their ability, have to close their eyes. But sometimes, depending on how good of a sensor you are, that payoff is worth it. See, obviously, high-level sensory techniques probably shouldn't be used in the heat of combat. They're most effective when being used for reconnaissance. And that reconnaissance can become particularly useful when trying to hunt down an individual. See, while yes, sensory techniques aren't best used in combat, sensory techniques can set you up to make combat as advantageous as possible. And this is why sensor types usually end up being assassins, with families like the Yamanaka clan and the Aburame clan producing not only high-level sensors, but also the highest level assassins that Konoha really has to offer. But what's so interesting about sensor types is while there are certain clans that are just inherently better at it, sensory abilities, kind of like ninjutsu, are something that any ninja can train in. Take, for example, Karin. With her mind's eye of the Kagura, she's able to close her two eyes and open her third to see dozens of kilometers in any which way. And upon doing that, she's able to see through walls, like she's using a Byakugan to hone on chakra signatures with such a level of precision that she's not only able to tell if certain individual chakra signatures are related to each other, but also see exactly what those chakra signatures are currently up to. Now, because of the mind's eye of the Kagura, Karin obviously falls into the camp of people that use individual ninja techniques in order to amplify their sensory abilities. And as the mind's eye of the Kagura is apparently an Uzumaki-specific clan ability, that would mean that on top of being incredible Jinchurikis and the best Fuinjutsus in the world, the Uzumaki were also incredible sensor types. But the vast majority of sensor types at the highest possible levels that we see over the duration of Naruto use nothing more complicated than your standard sensing technique. Take, for example, Mu, who was able to immediately deduce that Gaara and Rasa were related on account of how similar their chakra signatures were. Mu, who was also able to, from a great distance away, identify that the Shinobi Alliance was comprised of multiple different villages of chakra signatures, as those from Konoha have different chakra signatures of those from Suna and those from Iwa, and so on and so forth. Or take, for example, Tobirama, who was able to immediately deduce that Orochimaru's body was mostly comprised of Hashirama cells, and was able to immediately discern that Karin was a member of the Uzumaki family. And while you could just say, red hair, still impressive. But that's what makes sensor type ninjas so incredibly interesting. See, inherently, Tobirama and Mu are using the same technique, even though genetically they couldn't be more different. Tobirama's a senju, Mu is a non-person. They're from different times, kind of, and they're definitely from different villages, and yet somehow, some way, they're using essentially the exact same technique. And this brings us to the mystery of the sensing technique. See, because, well, yes, some of those who are channeling the sensing technique have to gather their chakra and close their eyes and reach their soul out in all directions. Others, like Minato and Tobirama, are simply able to place two fingers on the ground to immediately deduce everything that's going on around them. But how do they train in getting better at these sensory techniques? See, your answer for Minato might be because he's a Toad Sage, but Tobirama is not, and yet Tobirama is regarded as one of the greatest sensor type ninjas of all time. And therefore, your answer for Tobirama might be because he's from the Senju clan, and the Senju clan prided themselves at being good at everything, as after all, Senju means 1,000 tasks. But see, this only adds to the air of mystery surrounding the sensing technique. Tobirama should be good at the sensing technique because he's a Shinju. Minato should be good at the sensing technique because of his training as a perfect Toad Sage. Obito displays high level of sensory abilities as an adult, but doesn't display any as a child. So is it the grafting of the white setsu to his body that increased his sensory ability? We don't know. But what we do know is that there's as many ways to hide from sensor type ninjas as there is to find other ninjas using sensory abilities. See, because sensor type ninjas are something that every village has, and therefore it is a problem that every village has to deal with when battling against another. See, take for example Nagato, who was technically only defeated on account of the fact that Naruto is an incredible Senzu-type ninja and was able to follow the frequency of his chakra to his actual location. The reason that Nagato hadn't been found until Naruto was able to hone in on his location, even though hypothetically it should have been easy to find Nagato because he had to transmit chakra to the chakra rods to control his 6 paths of pain, Nagato made sure that whenever he transmitted his chakra out to his 6 paths of pain, that he was constantly changing the frequency with which he was transmitting his chakra. Think of Nagato like a radio station that's playing a song, but every 5 seconds the radio station switches. The entire song is going to be played, but in order to hear the entire song and get back to where that frequency is coming from, you're going to have to find each and every individual station that frequency switches over to. Members of the Aburame clan, on the other hand, understand, because they are such good sensor types themselves, the risk that comes with being identified by other sensory types. And therefore, in order to stop themselves from being identified by other sensory types, they're able to spread their bugs out over a wide field and funnel their chakra through each and every single one of these bugs, using something known as insect jamming technique. Now, this works obviously because the bugs in the Aburame and the Aburame clansman himself have a symbiotic relationship. That is, simply the bugs feed off the Aburame clansman's chakra, and in exchange, the Aburame clansman is able to control these bugs. Because the chakra signature of all of these bugs is identical to that of the Aburame clansman, whose chakra they live off, finding said clansman amongst thousands of technically their chakra signatures is almost impossible. And long before the Otsutsuki started wiping their chakra signatures so they could waltz through the boundary around Konoha that tracks the chakra signatures of everybody who enters, Mu was doing exactly the same thing. See, we've already talked about Mu as one of the most impressive sense-type ninjas in all of Naruto, and that's because he was. But he was also one of the most impressive counter-sensor-type ninjas in Naruto's history. See, because outside of Dust Release that allowed him to evaporate anybody he shot his geometric shapes at, Mu had the ability to not only make himself invisible, but also erase his chakra signature, which made him not only unseeable, but also unsensible, which is what earned him the title of the non-person, because he could just disappear. But since we're talking about the Otsutsuki wiping off their chakra signatures in order to break into Konoha, that brings us into the idea of sensory techniques as a defense. See, Konoha is filled to the brim with clans whose specific abilities cater to them being sensory types, like the Hyuga, whose Byakugan allow them to see multiple kilometers in all directions at the peak of their powers, or the Ninken, who are able to use their heightened senses of smell and their ninja dogs to track down scents from inconceivably far distances. But more than any of the other clans inside of Konoha, the clan that's known for their sensory abilities are the Yamanaka. See, while the Yamanaka's clan jutsu of mind transmission doesn't inherently lend itself to a sensory technique, the Yamanaka, like a lot of other clans, are inherently born better at ninjutsu or taijutsu or genjutsu, are born better at sensory abilities. And while those sensory abilities can be things like sensing transmission, a Yamanaka clan ability that allows for Yamanaka clansmen to pass what they're sensing and feeling to somebody else by putting a hand on them. And therefore, if a Yamanaka clansman wanted to help somebody who wasn't a sensor type understand what they were seeing and sensing, they could pass that information along to them through physical contact. Even that's not the reason that Yamanaka are considered to just be better as sensory types. They're simply, like the Uchihas, are born with a predisposition for fire ninjutsu, born with a predisposition to be talented in the field of sensory jutsu. And therefore, nowadays in modern day Boruto, like how the Uchiha were once assigned to the Konoha police force, the Yamanaka have been assigned to maintaining the boundary around Konoha and logging all chakra signatures that come in and out, as a wide-cast first response system to tell them when Konoha could possibly be under threat. Something that we saw in a more prototypical sense from Nagato long before Ino was ever in charge of the invisible bubble around Konoha. See, because for those of you who don't remember, the Hidden Rain is called the Hidden Rain because it's always raining there. However, the reason that it's always raining in the Hidden Rain is not just because it so happens to be in the Pacific Northwest, but rather because above the Hidden Rain are rain clouds created by Nagato. And as these rain clouds are made from Nagato's chakra, all of the rain that falls down from these rain clouds when it comes into contact with somebody whose chakra signature is not registered to Nagato already tells him that somebody not from the Hidden Rain has entered his village. And therefore, even though Jiraiya was trying to be as sneaky as possible when slithering into the Hidden Rain, the second that any of Nagato's rain came into contact with him, he was found out. And thus now, as you surely understand, there are a ton of things that one can do with sensory techniques. Whether that's telling what jutsu somebody's gonna use, telling if they're lying, or protecting an entire village all by yourself, sensory techniques are still, to this day, one of the most slept on kinds of techniques in all of Naruto. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Who do you believe is the strongest sensor in all of Naruto? Let me know in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's 3:30, I've already finished 2 videos, and I want to go on a run. See you later.